Beijing, 1966. The streets echo with chanting. Red banners sway. Fear hangs in the air. Jiang Qing steps from Mao's shadow. Once an actress, now his weapon. She will humiliate teachers, crush officials, turn students into instruments of terror. Mao shapes ideology. She enforces it, cold, precise, unstoppable. This is the story of Jiang Qing, Mao's wife and the ruthless, white-boned demon. Beijing, 1966. The city trembles under the first winds of the Cultural Revolution. Red guards fill the streets, fists raised, eyes wide with fervor. Slogans echo off walls plastered with Mao's portraits. Fear tastes in the air. Inside the Central Cultural Revolution Group building, Jiang Qing walks in. Her heels click on marble. She is no longer an actress. She is Mao's instrument, the executor of ideology made flesh. Students and young cadres look at her, waiting. Teachers and officials shrink back, unsure who will fall first. Her orders are sharp. Humiliate the teachers, purge the bourgeois elements, turn students into instruments of obedience. A teacher stands on a makeshift stage, trembling. A student steps forward with a stick. Jiang Qing's eyes narrow. Hesitation dies. The first blows land. Screams echo. Violence becomes duty. Mao watches from posters on the wall. He sets the rules. She delivers them. Together, they make terror visible. Roderick MacFarquhar writes, Jiang Qing accelerated the Red Guard's descent into organized brutality, transforming ideological struggle into physical terror. By the end of the week, the courtyard is scarred with blood and fear. Jiang Qing steps back, expression cold. The Cultural Revolution is no longer just Mao's plan. It is their machine of terror, deliberate, unstoppable, and deadly. By late 1966, Beijing's streets were alive with chaos. Red Guards moved in packs, chanting Mao's slogans, sticks and clubs ready. Windows shattered, walls plastered with denunciations. Fear flowed like a river through the city. Jiang Qing moved among them, calm, commanding. She pointed, whispered instructions, watched every move. Teachers, writers, cultural workers dragged into courtyards. Students obeyed, terror reflected in their eyes. In one schoolyard, a teacher knelt on the cold stone floor, head bowed. A student raised a stick. Jiang Qing's gaze fixed. The first blow landed. Screams tore the air. Lesson learned. Loyalty was measured in brutality. Mao's ideology hung over every chant, every act of violence. He did not strike. She did. Every command carried the weight of the chairman himself. By September, Red Guards spread beyond schools into universities, factories, and government offices. No one was safe. Hesitation was punished. Resistance crushed. Some victims never rose again. Historian Frank Dikötter observes, the Red Guards were not merely teenagers swept up in ideology. Under Jiang Qing's supervision, they became instruments of terror, carrying out purges with shocking efficiency. By the end of September, fear had a face. It was Jiang Qing's face. The Cultural Revolution was no longer rhetoric. It was violence, deliberate, unstoppable, and terrifying. By late 1966, the Cultural Revolution had a new rhythm. Chaos was no longer spontaneous. It was orchestrated. Jiang Qing watched carefully. She noted teachers who had once laughed at her, artists who questioned her taste, officials who whispered doubts about Mao. Each became a target. She did not need to strike personally. She only needed to point, and the Red Guards obeyed. A writer accused of harboring bourgeois tendencies knelt in a schoolyard. Students beat him. Jiang Qing's eyes never left the scene. She whispered instructions. Each command sharpened the terror. A former official, once loyal to Mao, hesitated during a public struggle session. Jiang Qing stepped forward. Her glare alone was enough. He fell to his knees, begging. By the next day, he disappeared from public life. Mao watched from the background. He set the rules. She applied them. Together, they made personal vendettas political weapons. MacFarquhar notes, Jiang Qing's cruelty became both political and personal, targeting individuals under the guise of revolutionary duty. By early 1967, fear had spread beyond classrooms and courtyards. It was everywhere, in universities, in factories, in homes, and it bore Jiang Qing's signature, precise, deliberate, merciless. By early 1967, the Cultural Revolution had become a machine with two operators, Mao, the unseen mastermind, and Jiang Qing, the hand that struck. Mao whispered ideology into meetings. He framed enemies. He dictated chaos. He smiled as students attacked, as officials fell, as culture burned. Jiang Qing moved among the chaos. She executed his orders with ruthless precision. Nothing was accidental. Every humiliation, every strike, every purge was calculated. In one courtyard, a group of artists knelt, their hands raised in trembling apology. Jiang Qing circled them like a predator. Mao's voice echoed from posters above. She pushed them further, orchestrating fear with subtle gestures and sharp words. Every act of violence reinforced Mao's authority. Every scream, every humiliation, every fall was proof. To survive, you obey. To rise, you obey. Dikötter observes, Mao's power depended on Jiang Qing as much as Jiang Qing's terror depended on Mao. Together, they created a culture of fear unparalleled in modern Chinese history. By mid-1967, the city itself had changed. Beijing was no longer just a capital. It was a stage, a theater of terror, with Jiang Qing directing and Mao smiling from the wings. No one questioned her. No one questioned him. Obedience and fear had become law. By early 1967, Jiang Qing's name was whispered in fear across Beijing. Teachers and school principals were her first instruments. Bian Zhongyun, principal at the Beijing Experimental High School, became a symbol. Students, urged by Jiang Qing's propaganda, dragged her into relentless struggle sessions. They shouted accusations. They struck with sticks. Bian Zhongyun fell under the blows. Her death would later mark the first teacher killed by the Red Guards. Artists and writers were next. Wu Zuoren, painter and professor, was forced to wear a dunce cap, confess to bourgeois sins, and kneel in freezing courtyards. Young Red Guards threw ink and books at him, chanting Mao's slogans. Jiang Qing observed silently, approving, precise. Even local officials were not spared. A minor party secretary in a Beijing district was dragged into the streets, made to kneel before students. His wife and children watched as he was humiliated for hours. MacFarquhar notes, by mid-1967, Jiang Qing had made fear a visible daily reality. She enforced terror with surgical precision, turning ordinary citizens into witnesses of cruelty. The Cultural Revolution was no longer abstract. It had a face, cold, calculated, merciless, and it bore the signature of Jiang Qing. By late 1967, Jiang Qing's reach extended to the very top of the Communist Party. No title, no rank, no revolutionary record could protect anyone. Liu Shaoqi, president of China, became a target of relentless humiliation. Red Guards dragged him through Beijing streets. He wore a dunce cap, kneeling on cold stone floors. Every day, every strike, every shouted accusation crushed him further. Peng, former mayor, watched his offices ransacked, books and documents burned. Students hurled insults, repeating Jiang Qing's words. Every gesture she made shaped the rhythm of terror. Peng Dehuai, once Mao's defense minister and a revered revolutionary hero, faced the harshest scrutiny. He had dared to criticize Mao during the Great Leap Forward. Now, the Cultural Revolution returned vengeance. Red Guards surrounded him during struggle sessions. They forced him to confess to capitalist roader tendencies, humiliated him publicly, and shattered the respect he had earned over decades. Jiang Qing directed the proceedings with cold precision. Every insult, every forced bow, every public confession reinforced her power and Mao's authority. University leaders and intellectuals were next. Professors at Peking University, writers, and artists were made to kneel in freezing courtyards. Their works were burned, their reputations obliterated. Chen Yi, composer and musician, confessed to counter-revolutionary thoughts as Red Guards chanted Jiang Qing's slogans. Dikötter observes, Jiang Qing became the instrument through which Mao extended terror to the very top of the party and the nation's cultural elite. Her cruelty was deliberate, precise, and comprehensive. By early 1968, fear was total. Titles and rank no longer mattered. Even the most loyal revolutionaries could be crushed. And Jiang Qing, the white-boned demon, ensured that obedience and terror ruled every corner of China. By 1968, Jiang Qing had become a figure both feared and untouchable. Her name echoed in schools, factories, offices, and theaters. Even the most cautious whispered it. The Red Guards had spread nationwide. Teachers beaten, intellectuals humiliated, artists forced to kneel in the streets. Cities and towns became theaters of terror. Every insult, every forced confession, every destroyed manuscript was her signature. Liu Shaoqi had withered under relentless public humiliation. Peng Dehuai, once a hero of the revolution, had been broken. Peng's offices lay in ruins. Countless unnamed teachers, writers, and officials vanished into obscurity or death. Jiang Qing consolidated cultural power. She controlled what could be performed, published, or even remembered. Art, literature, and history were rewritten to glorify Mao and her own influence. Mao himself watched from the shadows, approving, calculating. She executed, he dictated. MacFarquhar writes, Jiang Qing transformed ideology into terror. Her actions destroyed lives, careers, and the cultural fabric of China. Fear became a tool of political power, inseparable from her presence. By 1969, the Cultural Revolution had claimed its victims and reshaped the nation. Obedience had replaced trust. Silence had replaced speech. And Jiang Qing had left a mark that would haunt China for decades. The white-bone demon had risen, executed, and endured. Her cruelty was absolute, her influence unmatched. And for a generation of Chinese citizens, survival meant obeying the terror she commanded.